Thank you so much for your interest in Gathering Storm. Let's get started. This part's pretty easy unless you haven't taken off the shrink wrap. Speaking only for myself, I think the counters look very nice as they are. So are you really sure you want to go through with this? I have heard that some people just buy games and never actually play them. Maybe you can buy 2 sets. But I do strongly recommend magnetizing your counters using high-energy magnetic tape. Personally, I think the activity counters are the prettiest part of the game, whether they're punched out or not. Don't try to magnetize them, though. The activity counter table helps, but it's easy to see that players start with the least colorful activity counters. If you took my advice and magnetized your counters, you'll want to put the map board on either a big magnetic whiteboard or sheet metal attached to plywood. Setting up the counters on the map board is relaxing once you know where they go. So let's go step by step. The various tracks on the left side of the map board let the players instantly see what turn it is and the status of the key indicators for the turn. Future videos will explain what these indicators mean and how they change, and of course they are also explained in the rules. But you probably have a fairly good idea of their impact just from their names. This part of the setup is easy because the map board itself indicates where the counters go. When you finish a game, it's not a bad idea to store all the counters that start on the map board in the same place. This includes flags, trade pacts, and Civil War counters. This will save hunting for those counters when you set up for the next game, and there will be a next game. The balance of power charts are also easy to set up because the location of the starting balance of power counters is indicated on the charts themselves. As the game goes on, these charts will fill up with units, ships, and research counters, and both players will be paying closer and closer attention to them. The balance of power, which reflects the relative military and technological strength of the Axis and Allies, affects the game in many ways. The balance of power, other than its naval component, modifies the Russian garrison, which in turn affects Russian support and income. The overall balance of power may allow the use of military counters for diplomacy, and is especially important during the crisis phase in determining whether Axis aggressions can be successfully opposed by the Allies. One of the key questions in the game, of course, is whether the cost of contesting the balance of power is worth it. The naval balance of power chart looks almost empty, but in games in which there is a naval race, it can be almost full by 1939. Another difficult strategic question in Gathering Storm is how fiercely the Axis should contest the naval balance of power. In games which continue into a world at war, this same question arises. Defeating Britain at sea is one thing, but trying to defeat Britain at sea and failing is something else altogether. Scenario cards also indicate the positions of the starting counters, which makes setting up easier. We'll go through the German scenario card as an example, but the scenario cards for the other major powers aren't much different, except maybe for Russia. When playing for the first time, finding the counters will take more time than putting them on the scenario cards. But you don't have to go through that every game. How long it will take you to set up the next time you play depends on how you put the game away when you finish. Some players who have magnetized their counters set up their scenario cards when they finish a game, so they are ready to play again without having to set up. Even if your counters aren't magnetized, it's a good idea to separate the starting counters from the others when packing up. Then you won't have to look for the starting counters. You'll just have to put them on the scenario cards. This makes so much sense that it makes me wonder if my mother was right when she told me to put things back where I found them. Life would be easier if I did that, and it would be even easier if other people did that. But I can't imagine being that organized. In any case, we're almost done. It probably takes less time to actually put the starting units on the German scenario card than it does to show it in a video. What makes the Russian scenario card tricky is that the active Russian units are shown twice, once on the active unit row and once on the Russian garrison track. The Russian garrison is more important, so that's where you put the active Russian units. At one point, Russia had a duplicate set of units, so it could fill in both rows, but that proved to be the path to insanity. Once the active Russian units are put on the active unit row of the Russian scenario card, the rest is what should be, by now, standard stuff. Which is not to say that playing Russia is easy, because Russia has to keep a careful eye on its garrison, deal with both external and internal enemies, and all the while save enough tile points to mobilize. But think about it. If playing Russia in a game is very hard, imagine how hard it is to be Russia in real life. If you mind your own business, you get invaded. The Mongols, the Poles, the Swedes, the French, the Germans again. They weren't quitters. You get the picture. And if you try to stop people from invading you, you're expansionist and a threat to Europe and Western civilization. While communist propaganda portrayed Russia as a glorious socialist experiment, rather than as the hellhole it actually was for tens of millions of Soviet citizens, Russia did face some strategic problems that it didn't bring on itself. It's not easy, being a punching bag and a threat to Western civilization both at the same time. The starting activity counters for each country should be placed on tile racks or otherwise concealed, as activity counter values are often hidden during play. The starting activity counters for each country are their activity counter pools. The remaining activity counters should be placed face up in easily accessible locations. Many of them will be added to their country's activity counter pools during play. Having them at hand both saves time and makes it less likely that a player will forget to add an activity counter to his or her activity counter pool. The customized tiles were made during playtesting by printing numbers on a transparent adhesive plastic sheet. The numbers were then cut out and attached to wooden tiles made from molding. The things you learn. The random events card deck contains 144 cards, which are shuffled and placed face down, somewhere convenient for all players. The random event card draws and the effect of random events will be the subject of another video. Many, but not all, of the random event cards will be used in a normal game. The Russian purge cards are placed face down near the Russian player. The Great Purge card is only added to the deck when Germany takes the Rhineland and is removed from the deck if Russia reaches full cohesion. One Russian Purge card is drawn each turn. There's nothing to set up on the research record sheets, you only have to find them. Well, now you're all set to go. Even if you don't know what you're doing, you look like you do, and isn't that what's really important? I will explain the highlighters in a later video on research. You'll just have to listen to me again.
Outside the barracks, by the corner light, I'll always stand and wait for you at night. We will create a world for two. I'll wait for you the whole night through. For you, Lily Marlene, for you.